Hi Logic Language learners, I hope you are all really well. So this is a video which is going to just refresh the age-old debate whether we are using the passé composé, that is the past tense with a present tense have or be in the middle. So il a mangé, for example, nous avons dansé, etc., etc. Or whether we are using the imperfect tense, je mangeais, tu mangeais, il mangeait, nous mangions, vous mangez, il mangeait, etc., etc. So this is actually my most popular video. I've done a video already on this topic. Yeah, last time I checked, it was about 73,000 views or something like this. But we live and learn, and there are methods that I now use in my teaching that I think you'd probably find a little bit more direct. So this is kind of looking at what we did in that video and saying, can we encapsulate all of that into one rough idea? Because that video basically gives you 4 key ideas on how to differentiate between the two. That's great, they work, but this one idea might be better, okay? So whether you call this an update, whether you call this a streamlining, whatever you want to call it, please click like, please subscribe to the channel. And remember that all of my information on grammar tenses is available in podcasts, which can be found if you look at the link underneath, if you email me at that. So there's information about the podcasts underneath, and if you email me on the email address underneath, then I will sort you out the podcast. There are discounts for obviously buying more than one set of podcasts. So off we go. So for this video to be useful for you, you need to know how to form the past, the passé composé and the imperfect tense. You need to know what those are referring to. If you don't yet know what those are referring to, this isn't the video for you. To find out how to formulate those tenses, then just go to the search option at the top of YouTube and type Logic Language Learning space passé composé, so as spelt as in this video, or Logic Language Learning space imperfect, and it will give you all the keys on how to create these tenses very, very quickly. You need to know that to understand and benefit from this video. Alternatively, like I said, go to the email address, email me, and I will send you the podcasts on how to formulate things, which is a no more than 4 system. So 4 minutes of explanation, 4 minutes of test. So if you now know then how to effectively formulate both passé composé and imperfect tense, let's look at what we said in the previous video about a trick or 4 tricks which get us into an idea of when to use which. So we basically said, if in English you are saying I have spoken and you're hearing that have, then it's very much going to take you to the 1, 2, 3 options. So I have eaten, j'ai mangé, you have eaten, tu as mangé. And we said if we had was, were, or used to, now remember was, because I'm going to give you an exciting update on was that we didn't have in the last video. If you had a was, a were, or a used to, it will take you into the method with one verb. So for example, I was eating, I used to eat, je mangeais, I used to dance, je dansais, rather than the I have danced option. So that we were saying was basically what we were going to do to get you into the one with the 3 and the one with the 2, the passé composé and the imperfect. And we said that most of our dilemma in English was when we had what we call the simple past, the prétrit. So I spoke, he ate. Well, we are hearing one past word. And we said that could arguably be in French either of those versions. And the trick that I gave you was to quote 4 key ideas, which was repetition, description, mental state, or after the word if. So let's just very quickly talk through those 4 ideas, but I want to bring them together with a big key main idea that you're going to be carrying through this video, which is if it can be put down to a single complete action or a change taking place, then, or the moment the change takes place, then we will be going with the 1, 2, 3. And if we can't, we will be going with the imperfect, okay? So let's talk what I mean by a completed action, because this bothers people. So people often read this and they go, I don't understand. So for example, if you said yesterday I spoke with my mother, yesterday I was speaking with my mother, the human brain goes, well, both of those are in the past. Both of those are complete. I'm not speaking with my mother now. That's finished. So both of those are finished. So that whole concept kind of, confuses you. Or even I used to speak with my mother. What we mean by a finished, perfect, complete action is that basically there's one action and we know when it happened and it's all over and done with. So, whatever. I got up, I went for a shower, I had a cup of tea, I put on my green hoodie. I said to myself, Luke, you need to stop buying stuff this khaki colour. You always wear the same colour. I drank my cup of tea. I started the video I had planned, whatever. So those actions are done and finished. Whereas if you sort of said, I was putting my hoodie on when, you've kind of woken up the verb, to relive it, to kind of do something else with it. Or if you were doing it repeatedly, so, every day when I was at ballet school, I used to put on a hoodie on the way to class. Not at all in those days, because when you're young, you don't ever wear a coat or a top, do you? You're immortal. Out the door in a t-shirt in December. That's not like a single finished action. So that's the kind of idea that we're going with. It's in the past, it's over and done with, but we're not talking about a single finished action. So another idea would be this single change, a single change taking place. Let's be very, very clear with this single change. It doesn't matter how long the single change took. The world changed during the 20th century. We're talking about 100 years. 100 years. For those of you that aren't aware, a century is 100 years. So, le monde a changé. We'd go with the version, with the 1, 2, 3. We'd go with the passé composé. If we said, yesterday I was talking to my mother when my father rang, that talking to my mother could have taken 3 seconds. Unlikely with my mom, but basically it could have been taking 3 seconds. So it's not the duration of whatever the event was. That is not what is going to decide which of the two it is. Likewise, you could be talking about the same action in a different way. So for example, somebody could say, Luke, what did you do yesterday? You could say, right, I got up, I spoke to my mother, I did this. And the same action now that we previously spoke about in the was tense, in the imperfect tense, pardon me, we're now talking about in the 1, 2, 3, because we're talking about it in a finished single action. I got up, I rang my mom, I spoke to my mom, I did this. Whereas if I was revisiting that action and I said, okay, so when yesterday I was speaking to my mom, my dad also rang on the phone, oh, hang on, mom, I'll call you back. Whatever. Okay, so the same action. So then we talk about the idea of a change and a change coming into effect, or the start of the change. And this is really useful as well, particularly for the mental options. So for example, if you were saying things like, I thought, if it's your ongoing status quo, like, oh, in those days, I thought that babies grew on trees or something, rather than a change taking place, as in when I saw the photograph, I thought, wow, what a lovely holiday my friends Colin and Wendy have gone on in Lanzarote, which is true. So the single change, single action is going to take you to the 1, 2, 3. So now let's look at the 4 definition terms that we used in the previous video and see whether we can use this single change, single action idea to make them work. So we'd previously said that the 4 terms were repetition, description, mental state, and after the word if talking about the past. So those 4 were definitions that were going to take you to the imperfect. Yeah, so we had 4 definitions that were going to take you to the imperfect. And this method is, this single change, this action will take you to the passé composé, the 1, 2, 3. So it's kind of going this way, and if it's not over here, it will be over here. So for example, let's look at repetition. So every day when I was younger, I spoke to my grandmother in French, shall we say, whatever. Okay, so you kind of meaning, like, if you're talking about on that one occasion, I spoke to my grandmother in French on that day, I can see why you'd be tempted to stick it over here. But if it's I used to speak, If it's something that equates to a repetitive action, it is not a single action in the past. So, for example, when I was younger, I used to speak to my grandmother in French. Quand j'étais plus jeune, listen to the I was younger. Je parlais, I used to speak, the 1-2 option, the imperfect option. Je parlais, not j'ai parlé. When I was younger, I went to school, a repetitive action. I used to go to school. Now, I went to school, could be yesterday, I went to school, single action, je suis allé, notice it's a be verb. When I was younger, I went to school, j'allais à l'école, I used to go to school, because you're referring to a repetitive action. But let's try in this video and say, when I was younger, I went to school. No, it's not a single change. It's not a single action in the past. So it would go over there. So if you're still finding the repetition method quite a good one to go, or the used to method quite a good one to go with the was, keep using what we did in the old video. If you're finding, okay, the single action is going to pull me over here, and that isn't a single action, so I'm going to go over here, let that work. Then we talk about a description. Now, the thing with a description is it's not an action taking place. There's no start, there's no change. So, for example, yesterday, I saw Luke, he had a problem. There's no sudden start of that problem taking place there. It's just a description of Luke. Oh, I saw Luke yesterday. He had a blue t-shirt and, a pair of boots, whatever. And he was drinking, he had a coffee, he was drinking a coffee. All of these actions are descriptions of what is going on there. There's no sudden moment that took place. So if you said, for example, he had a problem, il avait un problème. Now, presumably in life, there's a moment where Luke, our protagonist, didn't have said problem. Luke always has problems. And then there's a moment where that problem kicked in, and then there's a moment where that problem ended. But if we're just describing, so he had a blue t-shirt, or he was wearing a blue t-shirt, there's presumably a point where he, took the t-shirt off. There's presumably a point where he put the t-shirt on, but our language is just describing what the status quo was yesterday. So he wore a blue t-shirt, il portait, he was wearing, il portait whatever, une t-shirt bleu. Fine. So if the description thing works for you, but again, he wore a blue t-shirt, is it a single finished action? You're not looking at the start of that action. You're not seeing the change happen. Okay? You're not looking at the change happening. You're not looking at the moment where that went on. The single change happening. So say, for example, it had been he bought a blue t-shirt. Il a acheté. That was the moment it was happening. So he had, il avait. He had a coffee, same words in English, or he had a tea, okay? You're looking at that. So he went into the cafe, he had a tea, he had a piece of cake, sugar-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, but by all means send me them. Lola's West Hampstead, big shout out. Big shout out to Lola's in West Hampstead. Send me vouchers, Lola's. You're getting really, really dear, and I keep telling everybody about you. The carrot cake, amazing. So even though the same language is he had a coffee. If it's when I saw Luke, he came around the corner, he had a folder with some notes in it, he had a coffee, it's a description of the fact that he was carrying a coffee, he had a coffee. It's not an action. I'm not referring to the start of that. So, il avait un café, as opposed to il a eu un café. So again, repetition, description. We can find it using repetition and description, but we can find the fact that it's not a single action and a change taking place, yada, yada, yada. Then we look at mental state, and mental state, again, is a little bit like description, but it's basically about, are you referring to the change taking place, or is that what is going on in the head? So, for example, common problems with this would be things like il voulait versus il a voulu. So, there is some flexibility with this for reasons I won't go into this video, but if you had, for example, like I said, he knew. you know, he knew. So when he was younger, he knew where babies came from. We're not in this sentence referring to the action taking place, the change taking place, as in when he read the book, he knew the answer. We're saying this is the status quo, but mentally, il savait. Yeah? When I was younger, I knew. Who did I used to know of any merit? Lots of great people. Debbie Reynolds. There you go. Cool. She was cool as she was cool. I used to know Debbie. And so, yeah, when I was younger, I knew Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher, actually, weirdly. I knew Carrie. So I knew Carrie, je connaissais, because it's a description of the fact that I knew Carrie. And there's no moment that is suddenly taking place. There's no moment the fact that is suddenly taking place. In other languages, for example, the same verb there, like in Spanish, if you had, for example, like conocer, the moment of getting to know somebody would use this one, and the description of knowing somebody would use this one. So it literally changes it. And there are verbs in French where that would be the case. So, for example, I knew something all of a sudden would obviously go to this one, as opposed to I knew would be over here. So je savais versus j'ai su. I wanted, when I saw the poster, I wanted to buy whatever. What am I looking at the moment? A long sleeve, wicking, marled, khaki green top. It's always khaki from Under Armour, or the charcoal one. I quite like the charcoal one. A brand I'm getting into for sports stuff. I wanted, j'ai voulu. You know, all last week, generally, description. I wanted to get this video done because somebody asked me about it. Je voulais. Same I wanted in English. One is the action taking place. One is the beginning, this genesis, this start of this action, and one is not. So again, if you find it from the mental state as opposed to the change taking place, whichever way works for you, but this, over here you've got 4 to remember, over here you've got one thing to remember, this mental, this change, action, you know. I also need to remind you at this point that I always say in the past, actions have auxiliaries. If you are referring to a single action, an action has an auxiliary. They both begin with the letter A, and it just reminds you to use the auxiliary tense. Have and be in the middle. By definition, there is another tense in the past with an auxiliary tense. We've got il avait mangé, he had eaten, but that's not our debate here, is it? Then we looked at the fourth one. So repetition, description, mental state, and after the word if. Now let's be very, very clear. Stop right now. Go to Logic Language Learning space if. If you type in a search term, even on my homepage, even on a laptop, you won't always find it. If you type in Logic Language Learning, all attached, space if, you don't need inverted commas, it will come up with a video on the word if. Let's be very clear. S'il te plaît, s'il vous plaît. Using the word if, I think so. The word if does not guarantee the imperfect. The word if does not guarantee the imperfect. I've even had French people who've wrongly, it's like when people wrongly say Luke and I, or Phil and I. So Simon was speaking to Phil and I, people say, thinking they're being elegant. No, because it's Simon was speaking to me, Simon was speaking to Phil and me, or me and Phil if you find it more comfortable. So people wrongly correct that. It's like who and whom. People think whom is always correct. It's not always correct if you needed who. So you get the same in French. You get people that always go to use the imperfect. Imperfect, meaning the one over here, is going to be used when your word in the past comes in a hypothetical situation. So I ate. Let's go with I ate, okay? So at first glance, I ate is an action. I ate a cake. J'ai mangé. He ate, il a mangé. Single action, so it would be over here. Good, yes, correct. After the word if, even though hypothetically, you could hypothetically be referring to a single action is not taking place in a point in the timeline that you know that it would be. It's not perfect. So for example, if you said, if I ate a cake, I would be happy. So you go, oh right, single action, I ate a cake. It's not reporting on something you have done in the past. It's not matching our criteria for over here. It might sound similar in English, but it's not matching a change taking place, an action that has taken place in the past. You might go, but it would be a single action, Luke. If I ate a cake, that would be a single action. No, because it hasn't taken place. It might resemble it in English, but it hasn't taken place. It's hypothetical. So hypothetically, I ate, if I ate, I would do this. The if section is going to use what we were saying over here, the imperfect. So if I ate a cake, si je mangeais un gâteau, I would be happy, je serais content, whatever the would. You could swap them round. I would be happy if I ate a cake. Alors moi je serais content si je mangeais, and you have to fight with every fibre of your being not to say j'ai mangé. So again, whether you're going with the word if but I tell you why, that's problematic. Like I was saying, is there are other combos that you can use with the word if. So for example, you can have present and present, present and future, passé composé in future, imperfect and conditional, pluperfect and conditional past. All of these pairings work with the word if. So if you like this, if you like this system, you use the gym. If you like this system, you will use the gym. If you have liked this system, you will use the gym. If you liked the system, you would use the gym. If you'd liked the system, you would have used the gym for whatever reason. All of those are acceptable pairings in French. So don't think every single time you say the word if, si, you're going to automatically follow it with the imperfect. But if it's your token throwaway hypothetical, if I went to the gym, I would see my friend. No, John's just had a daughter. He's on paternity leave. Who would I see in the gym? My friend Will, or my friend Paloma. So if I went to the gym, I would see my friend Will. Si j'allais. I went, single action, single action, over here, 1, 2, 3, je suis allé. If I went, hypothetically, so your hypothetical is going to pull you over there. Now, it might be that certain ones along the route you find by using the action auxiliary, is it a single change method? And other ones you go, do you know what, for that one, I'm going to just remember it and go over there. I don't mind, all right? So in overview then, let's just tell a little story, and we're going to go to the half an hour point, and I'm going to tell a story, and we're going to see which of our action methods work for us, okay? So, this morning, I've spoken to my mom. The fact that the have is there would work for you. It would tell you it's the 1, 2, 3, but it's also a finished actions. I have spoken to my mom. So single action complete, whether you're saying I spoke or I have spoken, puts it over here. J'ai parlé à ma mère or avec ma mère. Okay. She told me that my brother was working for a new client. Alors, elle m'a dit, action, she gave me that information in one go, so elle m'a dit, action over here, that my brother, que mon frère, was working. He isn't starting this work in the past. It's an ongoing thing. It's not a single action in the past. Que mon frère travaillait pour un nouveau client. Okay? I woke up, there's an action. So it's going to have the passé composé. Je me suis réveillé, not 3 words, obviously 4, because it's got the reflexive in there. So je me suis réveillé. I took a little shower. Alors j'ai pris une petite douche. When I was at ballet school, I always took a shower afterwards, because otherwise they threw you out. So je prenais, because it's not a single action, it's I used to take. So je prenais une petite douche. It doesn't have to be une petite. I'm just saying une petite. Let's save water, save the planet. Lovely. This morning I had a cup of tea. Alors ce matin j'ai eu, action, une tasse de thé. I knew that I wanted to drink a green tea. Je savais. There's not the moment it's coming into existence. Alors je savais que je voulais boire un thé vert. I had to do this video. Now, This is an interesting one. If you are describing the situation you are in, je devais, it's not a single action. If there's that feeling of shorter term, change coming over me in that period, all of a sudden, I really had to do that video. J'ai dû faire. Where were you this morning? Oh, I had to go to whatever. Had to go to university. You'll hear people say, oh, oui, ouais, je m'excuse, j'ai dû aller à la fac. J'ai dû. Because it's kind of suggesting that a change came into their life that they then needed. They were then in that situation to do it. So j'ai dû. Yeah? I couldn't do it. When I tried it in one go, it wouldn't work for me. I couldn't do it. Je n'ai pas pu le faire. J'ai pas pu le faire. Je suis pas arrivé à le faire. J'ai pas réussi à le faire. All these versions have got an auxiliary in them. Okay? I wasn't in a position to be able to do it. I wasn't able to do it. Je pouvais pas le faire. J'arrivais pas à le faire. Work, but the idea is less of that happening. When I saw my to-do list, I wanted to do this video. This was on my to-do list. Quand j'ai vu action 1, 2, 3, ma liste, ma petite liste, j'ai voulu, I wanted to, to do this video, faire cette vidéo. Notice the combination worked quite nicely. When I was speaking with my mom, quand je parlais avec ma mère, my dad rang. Mon père m'a appelé. Bit in the middle, action, auxiliary. So in other words, in overview, keep using the old video. It's perfectly great. Can't be too wrong if it's got 73,000 followers or whatever, people watching it. But it's just, can we offload a lot of this repetition, description, mental state, and if to this idea of it will be a passé composé if you really feel an action, singular, past, change the moment the change happens, whatever. All right? Final little bonus tip. In the previous video, when you were all basic, I said, okay, generally, most of the time, the word was is going to be the imperfect. And that's what I said. Quick update, and I have talked about this before on the channel a lot. If your was is referring to a change, an action, a single action, then by the laws I have just described, it cannot be there, can it? So for example, notice was can be two things. So if you say, for example, last night, London, he was arrested. He got arrested. Now, there's another argument here about learning how to use the passive. So go to Logiclanguagelearning space passive, and you'll come up with different ways of doing the passive voice. So, for example, il a été, je me suis fait, on m'a, whatever. And if none of those mean anything to you right now, they will do after the passive video. Yeah, the passive video is when the person that you mention or the thing that you mention doesn't then do the next verb. So, for example, Luke got promoted because of whatever. Luke didn't do the promotion. Luke got arrested. Luke didn't do the arresting. Somebody arrested Luke. An active sentence would be Luke arrested whatever, the students or something, okay? Because the person you mention is then doing the verb. So if, for example, we had London was bombed, which is the example I always teach with. If it were a description as per over here, or rather with our new method, it's not an action taking place. It's not London got bombed. London was bombed. So when he walked through London in 1952, London was still bombed and whatever, they hadn't fully rebuilt it, whatever. That's a description. Londres était bombardé. And we can use était, the verb to be, in the was tense. Last night, says somebody during the Blitz. Thank you, Germany. Luftwaffe, Blitzkrieg. Last night, London was bombed. London got bombed. Notice in English, we will often use was or got. We have two verbs we can use for the passive. That is referring to an action. So, Londres a été bombardé. You need to use your verb to be in the 1, 2, 3. Londres a été bombardé would then be this past participle, adjectival. Yeah? So London didn't bomb anything else. Well, yes, effectively, but but you know what I'm saying. So Londres, it's not Londres a bombardé. Londres a été bombardé. So you will often see this. The castle was destroyed in the whatever century. If it were as a description, by then the castle was already destroyed and then fine. Le château était détruit. If it's, whatever, Henry VIII took over and, the abbey was destroyed, a été détruit. And then the word which follows the a été, the verb to be, E-T-E with an acute, T-E with an acute, yeah, to acute, sounds like the was tense spelling, E acute, T-A-I-S, T-A-I-S, T-A-I-T, E acute, T-A-I-E-N-T on the day. Sounds the same as 4 of those was tenses, but the spelling is E acute, T-E. That will be used, and what follows is an adjective. So, for example, if you say the house got built, action, la maison a été construite. That is going to have to match as an adjective. So that totally plays into our, is it an action? If so, it will have, this thing going on over here, this 1, 2, 3, there's no need to worry about it. Again, no one is saying how long it took to build the damn house. The house got built over 10 years slowly. Who cares? The house got built. Action, single action. La maison a été construite. So in other words, it won't feel like it's one of these, but it is. The verb to be is what you're sticking this in. Yeah. So good. If you need the passive voice and you can't find it, then email me. I will send you the video on the passive voice, but you should be able to find it if you type Logic Language Learning space passive or passive voice or this business. I hope this action trick helps. Let me know if it helps. Good. All right, guys, I'm going to go and have a cooked breakfast. All right, let me know if this has been helpful. Please click like, please subscribe. Remember that we do have the podcasts, listening, reading, grammar, written grammar, and one-to-one lessons what you can listen in, my God, Luke, tell I'm going down the pub, that you can listen into. And also I have a Kofi account, Kofi underneath. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. I do very much appreciate when people buy me coffees. I don't always have time to respond and say thank you, but I really do appreciate it. It's normally only about £3, $3, but it does help me, and it just gives me a little bit of financial freedom to spend my time doing this rather than just doing private students. All right, good. All right, guys, take care. Bye-bye.